Hi, I'm Shiv.
And I'm Chitra.
We are the co-hosts of this show, Software People Stories.
We're happy to bring you stories of people associated with software as makers or consumers.
In every episode, we talk to people on their own personal and professional journeys,
Their interests and approach to work and life in a free flowing conversational format. We hope that you will be able to draw your inspiration from their experiences and insights.
These podcasts are made possible by PM Power Consulting, who have helped individuals, teams, and organizations on their delivery excellence journeys. Welcome to this episode of the Software People Stories. My guest today is my colleague and longtime friend J Veeraraaghavan, whom you've heard before. This time, we talk about JV's own experience in terms of handling role transitions in his career, how he was able to utilize his core strengths to help get new responsibilities and challenges, and when he got into academics, what he learned as a teacher and later on as a coach. His tip for compressing the time needed to learn something is something very interesting. Don't miss that. And finally, he talks about how to get an outside-in perspective very quickly, particularly when you're engaging in a new environment as a coach. Listen on. Hi, JV. Welcome back to the Software People Stories podcast.
Hi, Shiv. Been nice talking to you again.
Since the time we spoke last, the name of the podcast has changed.
Okay.
It used to be Software Lifecycle Stories, and since people are sharing more of their own stories, thought it's more appropriate to call this Software People Stories.
Okay.
So today, I wanted to hear your stories. Now, you played multiple roles. Now, initially, I know that you were a hardcore techie, including 4GL languages, then you were a team lead, managing projects, and then handling some business roles, then got into quality, then are leading a company, then getting into coaching. Mm-hmm. Now, in your own life, I see so many different transitions. How have you been able to manage all that?
The way I look at things is, none of these was actually managed. More often than not, I've actually viewed things as they happen and see what I can do to make a difference as I do whatever I do. I mean, when I started my career as a software developer, there was no thinking that at 15, 20 years from now I want to be a manager or heading a company or any of those. The aspirations were not. It was more about being successful in whatever you do and trying to see how you can make a difference in whatever you do and feeling a sense of satisfaction in what you accomplish. I think those were the in some sense they were internal motivators rather than trying to look at how the outside world looks at you. Right. So those were the things that kind of motivated me. So the first few years spent in being a developer, the focus was making sure that you do as good a job as possible there. Mm-hmm. And then when presented as an opportunity to actually go to a site to lead and get specs from a customer and trying to lead a project, that was a completely different challenge. So obviously, I realized that somebody gave me that opportunity because I'd done a decent job in my prior role. And they thought maybe the other skills that I brought to the table, such as communication or interface with people, or being able to kind of talk the language of the customer and be a reasonable listener or whatever. I mean, those are the kinds of things that probably made the manager think that I could be a effective player of that role, of going to a customer, getting requirements and coming back and working with the team to execute the project as a turnkey or a fixed price project. So basically, I think that confidence automatically imposed additional responsibility on you to see how you can succeed. And then you start going about figuring out how you succeed. Right? Those days, obviously, there are no great resources for you to look at, except to go and look at some books. So you start learning on the job. And then you start doing it and suddenly realize that other skills that you are able to exhibit come to the table, right? For example, the ability to handle a team, be able to get the best out of the team. Some of these came out, and I think it's also a little bit about the upbringing, the way that your family background and the way your values that are kind of taught to you. many of these actually help you in the role. So in that sense, while I was exhibiting my technical skills, I was also able to kind of work with a team to get things done. So naturally, the manager felt that I could actually be heading a group of people in kind of driving a business. So that's how the next responsibility of actually working with about 30 or 40 people to kind of work with different customers and get different projects and execute a business kind of thing in a specific area. That's how the next kind of responsibility came along the way.
Okay.
And then somewhere down the line there was also a need for interfacing with a very large customer, and very, very large customer like Tata Steel in this case, to be able to do something for them, from kind of creating a blueprint for them for automation and implementation of automated software or whatever across the organization, both the software and hardware. And again, that through a different kind of challenge, again the ability to interface with people and talk their language, business interface, and so on and so forth. I think that came to the table, being able to work with senior people. Now, the initial case was working with entry-level programmers. Subsequently, it was a case of working with people who are experienced, who had their own egos and working styles and things like that. So there, even more important was the ability to your interpersonal skills and things like that come into play a lot more. It's not just leading a team, but actually leading a highly skilled set of professionals who are experienced. That actually came to the fore, and many of these other responsibilities just got pushed to you because the company was actually moving in a different direction, and the company thought that I would be able to actually take up some of those responsibilities. That's how the whole thing happened. I think my intent was also to figure out how I can actually get more all-round exposure. Somewhere after about 8 or 10 years of experience, I realized that that's when I started understanding what I could be somewhere down the line. The first 7 or 8 years, there was no thinking about what I wanted to be and where I wanted to be after 15 or 20 years. But certainly after 8 or 10 years, I realized that there are some things that I could accomplish in life, and that is where I started realizing that more all-round exposure was needed.
Okay.
For example, technology-wise, product engineering was an important area. So I actually wanted to work on product engineering. Automation and tools was another area that I thought was during those days, I'm looking at late 80s, early 90s. There was a trend for more software engineering automation. That was how the industry was moving. Mm-hmm. So I realized that I needed to actually have some exposure there. Then as the world moved into the area of process and quality assurance, the software engineering was actually moving into focusing on more discipline and process. I realized that that's one place where an exposure would make a difference to me. And so an opportunity presented itself, and I took it up, heading quality at Tata Unisys. And I think after once I got through all of that, then the issue was more about how I was making a difference to both myself and the organization that I worked with a lot of satisfaction being the one that drove my, it was not only your accomplishment, but how you felt from the perspective of value add to yourself, which is when an opportunity came along in the product engineering space, where a highly technology product oriented company such as Novell offered me an opportunity. So there was a huge amount of learning. In a services setup, there was a lot of focus on working with people, working with projects, working with customers. Whereas in a technology setup like Novell, it was more about understanding technology and figuring out how you would be able to influence the direction for a product and technology for the company, right? That was a completely different thing. And I believe that the first 3 or 4 years at Novell was a phenomenal amount of learning, because somewhere down the line, after I started working as a developer, doing some design and things like that, I had actually moved into management. So there was a little bit of movement away from core technology areas. That is where I think Novell helped me with kind of, networking was state of the art at that time. And Novell was one of the leading players in that space. And getting into a company like that and learning technology, I think was a big value add for me that has actually helped me down the line. When I go and talk to people today as a coach, especially working with a technology company, they kind of recognize that you bring to the table some real life experience that you are sharing as a coach. As opposed to if you had worked in a services setup purely, the kind of value that you would bring to the table would be very different. You may not be able to appreciate the challenges that they have. So I personally feel whatever has happened to me, some of it has been more by accident, very little necessarily by design. But whatever has happened by accident, I have actually tried to leverage and take advantage of that and pick up whatever I could do and see, at that point in time, how else can I actually make a difference to the setup that I work with. So that's how this whole thing spanned out. Subsequently in Novell, I headed the development center. That was a definitely different experience, working with counterparts in the US. But I realized that after 2 or 3 years, it was also adding less value to me as a person, because there was a lot of debate more administratively oriented rather than neither technology oriented nor people oriented. So I realized that was when I stopped adding value to myself. Even if I was heading the development center as a managing director, I realized that both the value add to me and to the company was relatively minimal. So that is when I decided I should venture into some other career. And the first thing that I thought was going and doing some teaching, because that's interacting with people and sharing my experience and learning in that process was something that motivated me. So I said I'll try my hand at teaching. Did some teaching at IIM for a couple of years. The areas that I enjoyed working with, software metrics and product engineering. And I think it was a huge learning for me. I mean, to be honest with you, those 2 years where I spent teaching probably about 150 to 200 people, the amount of learning that I went through, the preparation that I had to go through to make a good job of what I was doing, I realized that phenomenal amount of effort went into it and a lot of learning in the process. And in some sense, that actually helped PM Power when we started it in 2006. While I was teaching at IIM, that's when we started PM Power also. So training, coaching, those were the things that we worked with. So I think that was a completely different path that we took, where we were not working with one company and trying to influence a small set of people, but we were working with different companies that brought different challenges to the table and the ability to actually make a much bigger difference than working for a small organization or a team. And I think that's been a very fruitful experience over the last 10, 12 years. Almost like if I go back, I must have worked with at least a couple of 100 teams over the last 10 years. 200 teams, maybe 500 to 1,000 managers along the way. Each of them has provided perspectives that has benefited me. And I feel that every day is a learning experience. When you go to for example, I actually was coaching a team 2 days back in one of the organizations that we work with. And it was a completely new challenge in the sense that traditionally when we do agile coaching, we actually start with understanding the team, doing some kind of an assessment of where they are and looking at gaps and saying, this is how you address gaps. But here was a situation where the management team came and said, this is an extremely difficult team. We need to get these guys going on agile the way that they need to do. And we have had major challenges in making them successful. And we actually want you to do it as quickly as possible. And there was no time to think about anything. So the intervention with the team had to be planned on the fly as you interacted with them. So I kind of attended their retrospective and planning sessions, and we actually worked in a kind of co-creating a kind of solution through the way, changing the mindsets of people along the way during those 2 to 3 hours of interaction, and then getting them to agree to what they would do. And suddenly I realized that in about 2 to 3 hours, there was a huge mindset change that happened that would probably have taken me a lot more if I had actually gone through a very systematic, step-by-step approach. So what I'm saying this is some of these are, you don't plan for this. I think, your ability to react or think on your feet and be able to do what you believe is right, as long as you come with the right perspectives, many of these work out very well.
See, it's good that you mentioned confidence as the first trait that you had, and also your manager spotted the talent and the potential and gave you additional opportunities. Now, in many of my conversations with people who are about to take on a new role, which is probably not exactly the same as what they were doing, this uncertainty of the new role, or the thought that they are probably moving away from their comfort zone or what they consider as their core area
Mm-hmm.
instills some amount of hesitation and fear.
Mm.
Now, related to this, you mentioned that in the Tata Steel engagement,
Mm-hmm.
you also had to interact with the leaders.
Yeah.
And later on, when you also became a leader, there are a lot of unknowns and ambiguities.
Mm.
So, for someone in software where we like everything to be specced out or everything to be in a detailed algorithms, testing, precision, and all that, how did you reconcile the one side where it is all probably very predictive or specific, which may be specification driven, and the other side, like the last example that you shared, which is about being there and then navigating on the fly?
I don't, I mean, honestly, I don't know how to answer that question, but basically I don't try to do too much of, thinking about reconciliation there. You just go there with an open mind. I mean, when you're faced with uncertainty and something that's new, more often than not, I've actually said, somebody has given me this responsibility, trusting me. So if that person has trust in me, then why would I actually worry about, anything, going wrong? That is one thing. And second thing is, I think the initial stages, maybe today, when when you've got a lot of experience, there's always this worry about uncertainty and, if people judging you and things like that. Whereas in the first 5 or 10 years, I never had a worry about somebody judging me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because one, I think probably the confidence that was built in through working with, especially when you, if I go back to my background, see, if I look at IIT, when I joined IIT, I was very diffident because I saw a lot of people who are very good. I mean, especially compared to what I had experienced in my, pre-university and school day, where you kind of typically were, be the topper in the class or whatever. But then you go to a place like IIT, you suddenly realize that 90% of the people are actually smarter than you. Very joy. And then suddenly you realize that you are in a completely unknown space. The initial feeling is that you are in the wrong place. But then what it actually ends up doing is, over the course of time, it actually kind of makes you understand where you are and what you are with respect to the others, and see what you need to do to be different and learn in the process. So I think by the time that I completed my graduation, post-graduation, I think a reasonable amount of confidence had developed. So much so that if somebody gave something, all I wanted to do was put in my best foot forward. If it didn't work out, it didn't work out. I mean, it was not for lack of trying, but it was certainly, something that maybe somebody would have done better, but certainly you're given your best shot. And more often than not, I think the faith also, I mean, I must also say that faith in yourself, faith in God, faith in multiple things, I think that also drove your success.
Okay.
But later on, you're right. I mean, so when you grow up, one of the problems with actually growing up is you want to be operating in a familiar territory, right? Because you're always worried about how people judge you, right? But I think certainly in PM Power, one of the advantages that we have had is that we have all operated somewhat kind of independently. We've all come there with a lot of background, with confidence that we'll be able to work together. So we know that as long as you put in your best foot forward, it's okay. And in any given situation, don't go there thinking that this will happen this way, and whether I will be able to do it or I will not be able to do it. I don't think I go there with that thinking. I said that if somebody wants me to do this, go there, look at the situation there and see how you can respond. And if, let's say, you are not able to do it, actually say that I need some time and come back, think over and do it. So I personally believe that going there with an open mind and trusting your own instincts and skills, these are the two primary things that have kind of got me to where I am today.
Nice. One thing that you talked about, the PM Power value of equality, I think that's very true. So much that we can learn from each other, and I think it's a good team that kind of supports everyone. So there's no fear of being ridiculed or the failure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the related thing there is, you also mentioned now that in your last assignment where everybody wants results very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get into a new role, like you mentioned early on in your career, the only resource probably were books.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we of course have so much of content available, and then we can probably more easily search and locate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you are pressed for time, have you evolved any techniques that have worked for you best in terms of compressing the time required to learn something new?
I've kind of often relied on, of course, books, like you said, is the older, ways of we learn. But today, I think the way I look at it is, I have a lot of people I can talk to learn from. So my first source of learning is fellow PM Pavarians. I think we have a wonderful set of people who bring in so many different kinds of value perspectives. Like, for example, somebody brings in a technology, is very good in technology. Somebody is very good in some of the people related side. Somebody is very good, dealing with leaders. So I think we have a lot of people who, since they come with so much of experience, they also their own ways of reading. They read a lot. Each one reads different kinds of, covers different areas. And so in that process, you actually learn by interacting with people. That's the first thing that I normally do. And of course, obviously the web is a resource that you use as a backup to this. But my primary source of learning has been with fellow PM Pavarians. That's the way I would look at it.
Okay. So the last question for this conversation is your own learnings and something that could be useful for others when you are more like an observer from outside. I'm just picking on a few things that you said about your teaching experience with IIM,
Mm-hmm.
where you actually have the students who are there to learn, and you probably have the unique position of watching or even understanding where each one comes from, where there could be some maybe conceptual challenges, or where somebody wants to go deeper, etc. As well as in the coaching kind of situations, when you said there is an assessment that you do at times,
Mm-hmm.
which is again from a view from outside,
Mm-hmm.
or some of the total quality models that you have been associated with, or for business excellence or organizational excellence,
Mm-hmm.
where you walk into an organization and then pretty much look at everything there, top to bottom, left to right, etc.
Mm.
So for getting a quick appreciation from outside, how do you go about that, and then what has that given you?
I mean, since you mentioned the business excellence, as one of the examples, so it's basically the kind of people that you're going to interact with and what perspectives that you are looking at from them that you believe will provide you with a landscape of the organization, right? You're going to talk with different levels of people who bring in different kinds of experience. So the idea is, what are you going to gain? So the intent is to get let's say, a breadth first perspective, right? Before you start diving into specific things and figuring out, where you can contribute and how you can contribute. So the idea is, what kind of people are what kind of audience are you dealing with? So even in a class, for example, you tend to look at the audience in the class with the kind of perspective that they bring or experience they bring to the table, so that you can actually plan out how you're going to actually make a difference to them over the course of the interaction that you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you find people are looking for very deep things. Sometimes you find people are looking at, I want a holistic perspective rather than some in-depth perspective in an area. So you actually, kind of understand you kind of interact with them and get a feel for what kind of people you are, audience that you're dealing with. So when you go to an organizational assessment, obviously you look for certain perspectives from leaders, you look for certain perspectives from teams, and then you get a landscape of the organizational climate, culture. And then you realize that, what are the kind of interventions that you need to plan at different levels. So again, going there with, getting a holistic, higher level landscape, and then jumping in, figuring out what kind of interventions will help. I think that's the thing that has helped me make a difference in this kind of an intervention, right? I don't know if I was clear.
Yeah, you were clear, but it just sounds not too easy. I'm sure there is a lot of learning and applying that one has to do internally. Maybe in some of our future conversations, we'll take that up, because as a coach, when you transition, when you want to help others achieve their potential or excel, the quality of not only observing, but also restraining yourself from jumping into solutioning, or the other extreme, stereotyping, and then saying, okay, because of this, okay, this person cannot do this at all, or this person only can do this. So avoiding those, I'm sure there will be a lot more nuances on that, maybe for a later
conversation. Absolutely. And I think honestly, as coaches, we have learned that. So maybe some of these have become easier today, because if you ask me 15 years ago, my ability to listen and not judge would have been very low, even after 20 years of experience. But today, with 15 years of coaching experience, dealing with so many different teams, at least to a large extent, we have understood that you need to be able to sit back and absorb as many inputs as possible before you start looking at how you can actually make a difference. It's a skill that's acquired over, or it's at least, in my opinion, this is something that many PM Pavarians have it, and we have learned from each other, as well as working with customers, learning from customers.
Wonderful, JV. On that note, I want to acknowledge that every time we've interacted, there's always something new for me to learn, and it's very energizing. Thanks.
Thank you, Shiva. It's the same. I reciprocate the same feeling, obviously.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community, or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate this show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.